turnips. What is happening in America right now is so unprecedented, I don't even know where to begin. CKBG, they couldn't make it this week. They had other life events going on, but I still want to do this pod because I think there's something going on right now that that the mainstream media is not talking about, that social media is not talking about. I haven't actually heard anyone talk about. And again, where you get your news is how your opinions are formed, and we just appreciate you listening to our episodes. 150 going strong. Thank you as always. But as more and more things develop under the Trump administration, it really feels like this is the biggest gamble in the United States history. The biggest gamble. And I'm talking about Trump overall as the gamble, and we'll specifically talk tariffs. But the biggest all-in that America's doing is making Trump president. And Trump is either playing 4D chess and everyone else is playing tic-tac-toe, or it's the inverse. And when I'm talking about gambling, I'm talking about the risk that he is taking, the upheaval in the government processes that he's doing. When you look back at any president or anything that's happened in U.S. history or frankly any country, everyone's making gambles, right? We gambled, FDR gambled putting in the New Deal, right? Presidents gambled joining different wars, whether it was World War I or World War II. Bush gambled going into Iraq. Biden or Obama gambled when he bailed out the auto industry and other banks after the 2008-2009 financial crash, right? Every president, every decision they make is a gamble. There's no guarantee what they're going to do is going to work or not going to work. But what Trump is doing is the most extreme. And really, America's fate kind of hangs in his balance. And I know that's sounding a little dramatic, but it's more and more seeming like that's what's going to happen. And you've probably already picked a side. You're probably either in a boat where you think Trump is the worst human being ever. Maybe he's the Antichrist himself. Maybe he's just an idiot that's just gotten lucky in how he became so rich and became president. And you just think he has no business doing what he's doing. Or you're in the other party where you think this dude is the only one that can change America for the better, the only one that can sustain American greatness, and the only one that cares about American people. Whether you think he's morally a good person or not, that's probably an entirely different debate in itself. And as we've gone through the first 2 months of his presidency, and we've talked about Ukraine, we've talked about the Department of Education, we talked about judges, and we've talked about debt and Doge and so many other things, we are now talking about tariffs. And everyone's talking about tariffs. And I'm not here to claim that I know more than anyone else. But if you have listened to the previous episodes of the Daily Turnip, we have done a phenomenal job of predicting things, not even on purpose. We'll just talk about something. We're like, most likely this is what we think is going to happen. And so far, we have been spot on. Honestly, I should probably hop on Polymart and make a bet about this. But when we look at tariffs, there's been so much anti-tariff rhetoric for numerous different reasons, whether people have taken a historical approach and say, hey, they haven't worked before, or whether people are like, there's no point, we're just going to hurt ourselves, the economy is going to crash, prices are going to go up, Americans are going to suffer. If you look at America right now and you try to just take a bird's eye view and understand the American position, right now, America is at the peak of its power. And that is a fact. If you look at in the world right now, America is the most powerful country. Whether you want to talk economic influence, whether you want to talk about businesses that keep the world running, whether you want to talk any tech stock, whether it's Amazon, Apple, Microsoft, or you want to talk about our oil companies, or you want to talk about the fact that we're the policemen in the world and we have military bases in over 200 different countries or territories, and we're everywhere all the time, always. America is at peak power. And when you are at the peak and you understand that there's a potential for massive decline, i.e. one thing that we've been preaching like crazy, $36 trillion worth of debt, that isn't going away, right? Well, then you have to act in the means to keep your nation going while you still have the power to do that. And so obviously, we're at tariffs. And obviously, we want no tariffs against the United States. It doesn't honestly matter what anyone else you're saying is listening to regarding mainstream media, TikTok, what you're posting yourself. At no point does the United States want tariffs against itself. And I hope whoever else you're listening to isn't like, India's 200% auto tariff on the United States is a good thing. Like, no, it's not. Well, this is not good for the United States. It's probably good for India, which is why they have it. Obviously, we don't want it. So every analyst out there saying it's okay that other people are tariffing us, no, it's not in America's best interest. And as we are at the peak of our power and we are being taken advantage of, or at least at times being taken advantage of saying, hey, America, you have to be the world policeman. You have to be involved in every war, even though half the time the United States is starting it or already originally part of it. And we want to make sure that, our trade works better for us than it does you because, hey, you can bring your McDonald's into our country. We'll buy your iPhones. We'll buy your Microsoft products. But we're going to make sure some of our industries stay going and make it so you can't enter other sectors of the market that we just don't want. And so the United States is now taking that position where, and really the Trump administration is taking that position where like, hey, I know we have all the power in these relationships. I want no tariffs because it is screwing us over in the long run. And we are already facing numerous different issues. We don't want issues with our allies or our alleged allies that are supposed to have our backs who, honestly, maybe some of them do, maybe they don't. We've already seen some of them say, hey, we want to team up with China against the United States on these tariffs. And then there's the angle of, hey, not only do we want zero tariffs because it's beneficial to the United States, well, we want to bring manufacturing back to the United States. And there's been so many arguments about, hey, no, the United States can't do manufacturing because the iPhone would double in price. So why would we do that? That's stupid. That makes no sense. So I'll comment twice right there. One, if AI manufacturing is going to be a thing, which if anyone has used AI before, whether it's ChatGPT or anything else, just how unreal and how powerful it is, America still has the innovators, the entrepreneurs, the money to back up building AI factories. And I'm not saying for every industry ever, but we would need to start building those factories now in order to utilize AI in the near future. And the second one, and honestly, it just kind of grinds my gears when you listen to people, and I'm sure, like I've talked to my liberal friends, I've talked to my conservative friends, I've tried to hear every side of the argument and every viewpoint I could possibly get my ears on. But one thing that just bugs me to my core, is when people take the supposed moral high ground saying, hey, I can't do X, Y, or Z because, I'm just a better person than you. I can't do this. And you're actually evil because you're doing that. Like, it grinds my gears because no one's perfect. And what I mean by that is, if you're to analyze a person from top to bottom on their moral high ground, there's obviously a lot of things that they do very poorly. Shoot, look at the worst thing, right? Shoot, it's, hey, you have an iPhone, right? Well, you want iPhones to continue to be manufactured in China because it's 50% cheaper. Well, who's making it in China? Oh, child labor. Oh, slaves, right? Horrific humanitarian crisis against the Chinese people or whoever they import into their country is making the phones. So we're like, so all those people in the moral high ground, like, I don't care about that. I want a cheap iPhone. And so that's why I always have an issue with the moral high ground argument. And if people really want to take the moral high ground, they'd be like, yeah, we have to stop child labor throughout the world, regardless of what the cost is, because the humanitarian aspect of that is horrible. And then the other argument is like, well, it just is what it is. You can't control everything. And so if we can continue to insert tariffs in order to hold other people accountable, maybe we're actually doing a good humanitarian thing. And then the other issue too is like, hey, let's look at the economy, right? And we just saw the stock market absolutely crash. I think I read it, $2 trillion wiped off the market in like a day or two. Okay. First of all, if we want to take again, what I'm saying, guys, everything is an opinion, so take everything with a grain of salt. And if you agree with it, hit the comments. If you don't, let me hear your thoughts on it. And obviously, I can deep dive everything for an hour, but we're just hitting the top overview. But when it comes to the stock market, honestly, it really feels like stock market manipulation. You really think every company in America became $2 trillion, or the collective companies in America became worth less than $2 trillion in the matter of 24, 48 hours because of reciprocal tariffs? Like, no, guys, no. Amazon didn't become less of Amazon in its ability to do what it does at an elite level, whether it's AWS, whether it's shipping your product. Yeah, sure, prices theoretically raised for 24, 48 hours, but that means everything goes into a spiral. And so you'll always hear it is whenever your party's not in power and the other one stock market drops, you always like, oh, look, man, that president, that party is destroying the economy. And then when you're in power in the economy or the stock market goes down, you always say like, hey, the stock market is not indicative of the economy. And so the real answer is, wherever we are, even if the stock market goes up $4 trillion tomorrow, is it's not. The stock market is not indicative of the economy. But the reason why I say it's probably, close to it, stock manipulation, if you're moving $2 trillion worth of money through the stock market, who's doing that? It's not the mom and dads of the world. It's not the small businesses of the world. It's not the person that's been saving up, investing in the stock market for 40, 50 years of their life. No, it's Vanguard. It's JP Morgan. It's BlackRock. It is the giant business, the giant banks of America that are like, oh, we can use this as justification to sell. We know people are going to hop on the frenzy because they're just reading news articles and they're just freaking the F out. And then once it hits the dip, that we pretty much know what it is because we're the ones moving tens of billions, hundreds of billions in and out of it. Let's put it back in at the dip, and it's going to go back up, and we're all going to get fat bonuses. So if you kind of look almost from like a pessimistic view of that way, you're just like, oh, wow, maybe the economy wasn't that bad, and it's just being manipulated by the biggest companies, biggest banks in America taking advantage of some headlines. And one thing we've talked on the Daily Turnup a lot, an insane amount, and overall my personal biggest fear of America is the $36 trillion of debt that we have. And I've said it, and I won't go down the rabbit hole of how horrible debt is for America, especially this level of debt. That's how the Roman Empire fall. That's how countries fall. That's how economies collapse, is unsustainable debt. Now, let's call a spade, and Trump has talked up a big game about reducing the debt, but yet he comes out with Pete Hegseth and be like, hey, we're going to put $1 trillion into the Defense Department or spend $2 trillion in defense. That is not going to help reduce the debt at all. And unless he's able to work with Congress to pass things that Doge found as corrupt and terrible and just fraud, waste, and abuse, this isn't going to get any better. So a lot of it seems like a lot of talk. Now they're saying because of these tariffs, because of moving the money in the bond market, we're able to help bring the debt down or at least not print more money to create another level of inflation. Maybe that's true. I mean, please do more in-depth research on it to gain your own opinion. I'm by no means an expert of it, but what I do feel very confident in is that $36 trillion in debt is not a good thing. And circling back to tariffs just before we move off this topic is that part of the Trump's philosophy, and we're always guessing what he's thinking, right? We're always kind of justify his next move or tear him down for his next move. Is Trump putting on tariffs because he does want AI manufacturing back in America? Is he putting on tariffs because he wants zero tariffs against the United States? That he wants other countries to stop manipulating the currency prices, or he wants X, Y, and Z from another country? Or is he doing it because he can and he has the means to? It was announced on the news today or yesterday, depending when you listen to this episode, is that there's a 90-day pause on tariffs and everything's going to 10%, but you read more into the details and it's a little more complicated than that. And people are saying he has no idea what he's doing. Again, maybe that's true. He's either playing 4D chess or tic-tac-toe. There is no in between the two on what he is doing. And at the end of the day, we can only guess. We're not in the inner circle. We're not in the briefings. We don't really know what's going on. So depending if you like him or not, is probably honestly how you feel if he's playing tic-tac-toe or 4D chess. But the bottom line is he has the means to push around every other economy in the world because they're dependent on the United States. And maybe you can say, hey, that's bullying other nations. But guys, like, come on. We've been the world policeman for, since World War II. We get involved in Ukraine. We're like, oh, maybe we don't want to be involved in Ukraine anymore. It's like there's all these reasons why, and then every country just gets mad at you. So you're damned if you do, you're damned if you don't. And so right now, the United States has the means to level the playing field on tariffs to benefit the United States. And maybe that's not a bad thing. But there's only one country in the world, and we have talked about this, where the United States cannot get what it wants, and that is with China. As we know, China is an incredibly strong country, both economically, both military. They're authoritarian government. They have absolute control over the Chinese people. The censorship is incredibly high. The propaganda is unreal. At least one thing in America, you can say what you want, but dang, you can say what you want in America without repercussions. You can hate any president you want, whether it's Obama, Biden, or Trump, and you're not going to get thrown in jail or just disappear somewhere. And so right now with China, like the United States has been paying China as the enemy for the last few decades. Why? Well, what they've done in Hong Kong during COVID, they're preparing to invade Taiwan. Depending on what report you read, the Chinese may be ready to invade Taiwan by 2027, by 2028. And what they do to the Uyghur Muslims and all the other horrible things that the Chinese Communist Party does, really not the best place. But beyond, the child slavery, the child workers making your iPhones. It's just crazy. And so the United States is trying to very hard to paint China as the enemy. And then China very recently, if you've seen it on social media, if you have social media, Instagram, TikTok, YouTube, Facebook, whatever, I've seen more positive articles or videos about China than I've ever seen in my life. Speed, he's a YouTuber, one of the more popular YouTubers on the platform, went to China recently and was wearing a shirt with a Chinese flag on, and he was talking to a bunch of Chinese. He's like, oh my gosh, this country's amazing. This is great. And it's just very, very interesting timing that all this pro-Chinese propaganda is coming out as Trump is in a massive trade war with China. I don't know. Maybe that's my tinfoil hat that I'm putting on. Or maybe there's more to it, and I'll leave that up to you. And then the last thing I want to say on this before we pivot real quick is that I've seen some articles recently talking about American allies turning to China to help deal with the United States tariffs. That, to me, if it is true, I'm not confirming this true, please do your own research. If that is true, talk about getting stabbed in the back. And you can be like, no, MR, listen, the United States is betraying Europe. Are we, though? Now we're playing hardball. We're trying to get things more favorable for the United States. But hey, check it out. We have tens of thousands of troops scattered throughout Europe, protecting Europe. Hundreds of billions of dollars invested in Europe to defend Europe from Russia, like NATO countries from Russia. Yes, playing hardball with Europe for the last 2 months. Yes, European leaders hate Trump, and Trump is probably getting a little too personal and trying to be like, hey, if you're not going to play ball with me, if you're not going to do your fair share on NATO, if you're not going to spend the required 2% of your GDP on defense like you're supposed to do, then, I'm going to play hardball. Well, if 2 months of turbulent relationships is going to wipe out 80 years of friendship and camaraderie and everything else, and they're turning to China, who is also a known adversary and a known threat that steals on everyone, whether they're stealing intelligence about your country or they're stealing IP information and just making a makeshift product of your own to undercut the market. If that is true, that is, I don't know, that's crazy. I got 2 more things I want to talk about quickly. It is that American first mentality. And so the American first mentality, which Trump is all about, has been received with so much backlash from people that don't support Trump. And look, I'm not going to sit on here and defend Trump. Like, morally, I think incredibly questionable, and you can look at his track record and just tear apart wherever you want. You're probably pretty justified. But if you're an American and you're listening to this, I really want to know, please put in the comments or just think about it. Why is having an American first mentality a bad thing, right? By having that mentality, you're like, okay, I want my country to be successful. I want my people in America to be as successful as possible. And I want to do literally everything I can with the policies that we make to ensure that America is successful. Hey, news alert, every other country is doing it. That's why they have tariffs against the United States. That's why they have the policies. That's why all the European countries gathered together to create the EU, because they knew they couldn't compete on a world economic stage. So they had to gather together in order to be competitive, in order to act in the best interest of their own country. And so maybe it's Trump just saying it. Maybe it's the marketing that's gone into the American first. But the United States isn't doing anything other than what everyone else is doing. I mean, shoot, and both sides of the aisle, depending on who's president, is basically saying like, hey, we don't want to be the world's policeman anymore. We don't want to spend hundreds of billions of dollars on defense in order to be in every country involved in every single war or trying to be at the negotiating table for everything. Like, maybe we shouldn't be involved in everything, because if you look at the U.S. track record, it doesn't always have the best record on intervening in other countries' foreign policy, or I guess it'd be their domestic policies. And so we don't help Ukraine, or if we do help Ukraine, if we do give arms to Ukraine, if we don't give arms to Ukraine, like, you're damned if you do or you're damned if you don't. And it doesn't matter who's president. Like, it's so funny. Like, people, I don't know. I won't go into it. But it doesn't matter if you're president. It doesn't matter what party is. The opposition, who's ever not in power, is just going to hate on you literally no matter what you do internally. And honestly, it feels like our internal division, which is more times than not feels very fabricated and very made up, could be our very own undermining. And I want to end on this. And this hasn't been in the news recently, but I want to hear it in the comments. I want to know what your thoughts are. The United States, what are your thoughts on the United States buying Greenland? So I put a lot of thought into it, a lot of research into it. And again, I'm talking strictly buying Greenland. I'm not talking military invasion. I'm not talking taking over. Nothing. Just buying where Greenland agrees, yeah, yep, we'll sell our country to you. And looking at it from the United States perspective, there's only one negative I see. Only one. Right? And I'll get to that one in a second. When you look from an economic standpoint, phenomenal, like amazing. You're potentially getting trillions of dollars worth of rare earth minerals that will keep the United States completely competitive against the world. It'll help us domestically immensely and will make us less reliant on other countries. From a military defense standpoint, it's like, oh, these are incredibly strategic locations. We already have one base there now. These shipping routes are going to open up so we can expect different type of military vessels to go through. Oh, and then we can also expect other commercial vessels to go through that'll help economic growth. Right? These are all positives to America. You know, there's like 54,000 people currently, like Greenland citizens living in Greenland. You really think that if Greenland becomes a state, there's going to be hundreds of thousands of Americans moving to Greenland? Absolutely not. No one lives in Alaska right now. The state is massive. And the reason why, it's incredibly hard to live there. And Greenland isn't any easier. And so if you're looking at it almost from a Greenland person, if you can be like, oh, I can be a part of the United States, so I get all the benefits to be in the United States, and then all the negatives, no one's going to bother me because I'm actually very isolated, very far away. So I really get a lot of benefits. And if they buy me, and each citizen in Greenland, because there's only 54,000, gets like $3 million, what do Greenland people have to be upset about? They're not the ones that are going to mine all the earth metals. They're not the ones that are going to military bases in the far north where it's almost completely inhabitable. What, they're going to get a McDonald's? Okay, cool. Well, they're going to turn into a little bit of Iceland where their tourism goes way up, and maybe their only large town turns into a tiny little city, and so more people experience the Greenland culture and understand what it's like to be from Greenland. But that doesn't really sound like a negative. And so you're telling me you get a lot of money, you get people coming in for tourism, and that's really the only change you can expect, because I think a good comparison is look at Northern Canada, look at Iceland, look at Alaska. There's not a ton of people trying to move there. And so MR, you said there was one potential negative to Greenland becoming a state. And it's only negative to the Republicans, because if Greenland becomes a state, that means they get 2 senators. A tiny state, well, right now country of 54,000 people gets 2 senators. That gives them disproportionate power, their voting rights in the Senate, which is insane. And why is it disadvantage to the Republicans? Because right now, more likely than not, they would be Democrats. They'd be in the liberal side. So the liberal opposition, honestly, you should be like, Trump, this is a great idea. You should do it. Because guess what, man? We're going to own the Senate from here out for a long time. Because isn't that why Puerto Rico isn't a state and it's a territory? It's because they're afraid it's going to change the balance of power. I mean, the more you look into it, it's, I don't know. Please share in the comments. I really, really want to know your thoughts. And to wrap it up, thanks for taking the time to listen to this episode. I know this was very much or just a lot of a rant, almost just the frustrations going on. But it does really seem like the United States is gambling its entire future on Trump, on tariffs, on everything that he is doing, whether it's through military, whether it's through taking on Panama or Greenland, whether it's through trying to cut fraud, waste, and abuse from the government. You name it, something is happening and something's being looked at. Now, is it done the best way? Is it handled the best way? I think the fair argument's no. Are they moving too quick for the government the size that it is? Yeah, potentially. I think that's a super fair argument. But if you're an American and you want to do like, hey, what's in the best interest of me as an American? To my perspective, we got to bring debt down. We have to bring it down. If we can get equal trading with our partners so we don't feel like we're getting screwed and we're getting taken advantage of, I don't see how that's a negative. And the other thing, too, is it's okay if life is hard for a little bit in time. If you look at the big picture, you're like, oh, the United States economy could collapse because we've mismanaged X, Y, and Z so much. I think we would all, if we look in a crystal ball and be like, oh, in 5 years, everything's going to collapse. Be like, no, I can take weeks of hardship in order to guarantee the sustainment of the United States. And that's probably one of the biggest problems with their country, is that no one's willing to just take the loss in order to reset. Like a sports team where they have to sell off a lot of their best players in order to get draft assets so they can rebuild the team. We just refuse to rebuild, and that could hurt us in the long run. But all right, everyone. I will stop rambling. But thank you so much for listening to another episode of the Daily Turnup. I appreciate it so much, and I know CK and BG do as well. And they will be back next week, and we'll be back better than ever. Please hit the subscribe button. Please like it. Please tell everyone you know about it. And like I said, I just had a lot of very controversial, a lot of intense things. So please leave a comment. Let's have a good discussion, good debate. I would love to hear your thoughts, or if I have a blind spot. And remember, everything I mentioned, I could talk like an hour on it. And I'm trying to keep this under 30 minutes. So please be kind. But as always, I hope you have a great rest of your day.